Okay, think I'm ready. Good evening and welcome, Kaiju fans, and hell, even Kaiju haters. Pull up a seat, grab a drink. It is time for the Kaijuologist to pontificate, which, as I understand it, is a fancy term for bullshit. Now, tonight's episode will be brought to you by wine, because well, the Kaijuologist likes to feel a little sexy when he's discussing Japanese men and giant, potentially hazardous latex monster suits. Bottoms up. Mm. Now, as promised, this episode is going to be a compare and contrast between two of my personal favorites. I thought because I laid out the groundwork for this idea of categories within the genre, be good if these next couple videos I give you examples for the category. So tonight we will be tackling the versus category. So all right, in this corner we have the classic, the timeless, the kaiju film by which I tend to judge all other kaiju film, the original Mothra versus Godzilla, 1964. And in this corner, we have my personal favorite from the Heisei series, Godzilla vs. Biollante, 89, I believe. So let's get into it. Let's start with why are these good examples of the versus category? First off the bat, one of the questions we have to ask is, does this movie justify why we have two monsters in the same place at the same time duking it out? So we'll start with Mothra. I think this film actually handles it beautifully, especially on Mothra's end. Godzilla rises from the dirt, from the ground, which is weird, but the timing of it isn't. The timing of it is actually pretty smart within the construct of the script. So we have two options here of why Godzilla woke up, and neither of them really seem to be addressed within the actual script itself. Option A, we have Happy Enterprises, that is got its land development going. It is very possible they're the ones who woke up Godzilla. Perfectly plausible, ties into Happy Enterprises, which is also holding the Mothra egg. It's causing all the problems in the film. It works great. The other option is that it's the same hurricane, typhoon that knocked Mothra's egg loose and ran it into the bay. Either option is clever in that it still ties into events within the script. It isn't, especially the later Showa films get really sloppy with this and lazy with the Monster Island motif. Monsters just seem to appear when it's convenient and there's no strong explanation or no tie into the rest of the script for it. So this film actually handles the Godzilla end really well. Mothra, it's much more direct. They come and directly ask Mothra to show up and kick Godzilla ass. And even more importantly, probably the best justification in any kaiju film for two kaiju to be fighting. Mothra starts off defending the humans, but even before the battle begins, it's clear she has to defend her egg from Godzilla. It is literally her legacy, her offspring that are now in the line of fire. So it makes perfect sense why she is fighting this monster. So the justifications for why we have these two monsters work out just fine. So to contrast, Godzilla and Biollante, a very unique situation, that Biollante being the clone of Godzilla, and the script is very careful to address this. These are not brother and sister. These are not cousins. They are the same monster. And we've got our new psychic friend Mickey, who even comments this idea that she being Biollante, is calling out to Godzilla. She is summoning Godzilla to her. More critically, why are they fighting, right? So we have Erika, this girl, and it is a sloppy little detail of the script that frankly they could have tied up so much easier. this idea that her spirit is attached to Biollante. Okay, great. Either way, uh, again, it's sloppy. They never really extrapolate in it in a satisfying level of detail, but it's there. But if Biollante really does have the spirit or even the DNA of a human, it stands to reason that Biollante is on the side of the humans. She wants to protect her home turf. She wants to protect her father. She wants to protect her people. So it makes perfect sense the first time they fight. The second time, too, we have that interesting plot element of the anti-nuclear bacteria. And it's very telling within the plot that the military's efforts to raise Godzilla's body temperature, get the bacteria working, it's not working. And then Biollante shows up. The battle's pretty brief but exciting, but it's that giant acid sap spray attack. And then right afterwards, Godzilla is sick and he's dizzy and he's like drunk, staggering out. Biollante did the job of raising his body temperature. That's what she showed up to do. She once again showed up to assist the humans. And again, it's a very unique monster relationship that, you know, they're not just related, they are the same monster. They sense each other, they seek each other out very naturally. So justifications in both of these films really solid. How about monster traits? The different characterizations of the monsters. Both films excel at this, but again, Mothra versus Godzilla, it's as far as versus films go, it's almost hard to even touch for me. The characterizations of the two monsters are so deliciously polar opposite. Mothra is, this is one of the reasons I wanted to do these films in a compare and contrast, or the interesting similarities. Both these films feature a female kaiju. Rarely happens in any Godzilla movie. I think Megaguirus, they hint at the idea of a queen, but even then it's not as explicit as in both these films. They constantly refer to these monsters as her or she. Both of them are very organic, actually. Mothra very much looks like an insect. Their designs are pretty practical. Biollante's latter form, yeah, not as much, but we see it's mutating into Godzilla. It's still, if you told me, you know, mash Godzilla in a tree, it's not too bad. It's not far off. But they both have this gentler quality to them that I think parallels or is at least an interesting juxtaposition to Godzilla, who in both of these films, and this is my favorite kind of depiction of Godzilla, he is very much the villain, he is very much the antagonist, but it's not just evil for evil's sake. He's a force of nature. He's a hurricane. He's a tornado. He is something to be feared and concerned with, but it's also understandable. He is part of nature. He's an animal. And so the conflict between the two monsters is just, it's fun because you get that sense of the very different personalities going on here. So we could go into the actual battles themselves, and this again is a big part of how I judge how good a versus film actually was. Is there tension in the battle? Do we actually wonder who is going to win and who is going to lose? And do the monsters utilize interesting tactics? Is there interesting choreography at work here? Let's start with Biollante this time. Well, both films, interestingly enough, we see the monster go through two phases of its cycle or its evolution. Biollante starts off as this very innocent, demure rose. I mean, it's just a giant rose with little teeth. It doesn't look especially impressive. You think, once again, Godzilla is just going to trash this thing, which he does, and fairly so. It's a giant rose. But that giant rose puts up a good fight. Damn it, that giant rose does not just go quietly into the night. It's throwing the vines everywhere. It pulls Godzilla underwater. He's biting, he's chewing at the vines. For what should have on the surface seemed like a very obvious, easy, done and out battle, Toho and the special effects folks on this film did a spectacular job of adding some tension to that battle. The second battle, frankly, in my opinion, it's not quite as creative, but it's still really exciting to watch because that Biollante prop is just stunning. I mean, it's massive. Its reveal moment when it blows out of the ground is spectacular. It has that crazy like where it has the root legs and it crawls towards Godzilla. Um, it's still exciting and it's well done. But that's one of the differences between these two films is Biollante shows up the second time way more powerful, way larger than life. So we go to Mothra versus Godzilla. The first fight with Godzilla and Mothra is it's timeless. It is one of the definitive Toho kaiju moments. It is so beautiful because first off, we've already the script has acknowledged if Mothra goes into this fight, she's done for. She's gonna lose it. They know she even if she can at least get Godzilla away from the egg, away from the cities, she's not gonna make it back to the island. So it's already tragic to begin with. You're sitting here thinking, how's this poor fluffy insect gonna stand a chance? And yet she does. She knocks him over with the wind. She drags him by his tail. She's scratching and tearing at his head. She freaking gives her all, and I cannot heap enough praise on Eiji Tsuburaya. The special effects are stunning. Mothra, I'm not sure Mothra ever looks as good as she does in 1964, even into the Millennium series. The prop is stunning. The prop is absolutely stunning. The shots where you see all the legs moving and the head weaving and the wings going crazy, it is. I can't even fathom in 1964, especially when you think about that they're like the production schedules are right up against Ghidra, the three-headed monster. It's insane what they pulled off with that fight. It's beautiful, it's epic, and then poor Mothra gets hit with the atomic ray, and even dying, she still has this sense of an organic quality to her. You feel her suffering, you feel her letting go. So then we move into the second battle with the larva, and unlike Biollante, this time it almost seems even more impossible. Like, how are these two larvae? It's a fun little twist in the plot. This is, what, 4 decades before Tokyo SOS. So this idea of two Mothra larvae is genuinely a surprise. This was a great little twist at the end of this film to have two of them. That said, you still think, what chance do they have? A lot of fans, I noticed, the community doesn't seem to care for this idea that the two Mothra larvae can overtake Godzilla. Yeah, you can argue the realism of it. We're talking about Godzilla films here. I like it though. I like the underdog quality here. I like that there is a tactical strategy that the Mothra larvae have to use. I mean, you think about Mothra was her own creation and her own film 3 years before this in '61. Whoever would have guessed that this idea that the caterpillar sprays web to become the butterfly, that later on down the road that would be used as the main weapon. It actually, from a writing and directing standpoint, to me is pretty damn clever. And it just, again, it creates a monster battle that is very unique and engaging and tense, because you think these poor larvae have no chance, and they put up a hell of a fight. Unfortunately, the larvae are kind of the big special effect womp womp moment of this. I'm sure most of you have noticed, if you've seen the movie enough, there is a shot you can see the little rotator wheels underneath the props as they're coming out of the water. Oh, 1964. Okay, so let's see here. Moving on. Let's talk about these two films. One of the things I always appreciate in these films is when we can bring up some engaging philosophical or political discussions, and both of these films knock it out of the water, in my opinion. Biollante is a little more obvious one. So this is, Toho's first post-Cold War. It's I mean, this film was 5 years after the return of Godzilla. It's a very different political environment, and what strikes me is how surprisingly relevant the film still is. So much of it, I mean, it's talking about chemical warfare. It's talking about the weird economic rivalries between the different nations. Now, mind you, Biollante's script unfortunately has so many working ends in it. None of them you really get a satisfying conclusion, bite to. But they're there and they tried, which so many of the other films, especially in the Heisei series, just very casually throw out sloppy politics. This one at least seemed to have interesting political discussions going on within it, and especially this idea of the bioengineering, cloning. This was all. The film is 26, 25 years old now, but at the time that was still pretty brand new and exciting science, and it still is today. I mean, that's what I was talking about when I say the film is still. You could take a lot of working ends from this film and move it right into today, and it would still be interesting and engaging on an intellectual level, at least the stuff that I find engaging. The whole secret or the made-up country of Suradia, right up there. Next summer, I'm going to Suradia and I'm going to Rolisica. I've got my tickets booked. But again, it's interesting that I think this was like a year out before the Gulf Coast crisis that America got involved in. And I don't know enough. If anyone wants to comment on this and talk about where the Japanese were in the initial Gulf conflict. But I think it's interesting that this is the first kaiju film to really bring up like politics in the Middle East. And it's really the only one I can think of since that so much of the plot stems from that area. The science it's almost silly that it didn't come up earlier, even in the goofy 70s Showa series, this idea of a Godzilla clone or using his DNA against him. All of these are it's great stuff, and it's really a shame that as good as the film is, it rushes most of it. You don't get to chew into a lot of this. So let's move it back to Mothra. This is one of Ishiro Honda's just absolute shining moments. I mean, it's like this one, Gojira, War of the Gargantuas. This is where you can feel his heart and soul is in this movie, and it's especially that moment. We have the reporter squad, and they're there on Infant Island begging to the tribe, please, we need help. Godzilla is going to kill everyone. And that speech, I got some notes here. That actress, Yuriko Hoshi, she plays Yoka, the female photographer. She gives that beautiful speech about the good and are dying alongside the bad. This monster isn't singling out the evil who, did your culture a disservice. And then it's interesting, too, that the fairies in Mothra, even before the Islanders, are like, yeah, we get this, you're right. And I think that is the heartbeat of a lot of Honda's work, is that as much as it's in human nature to segregate, it doesn't work. At the end of the day, the consequences that one culture has to suffer will bleed into other people's worlds. We don't get to be as separate as we sometimes wish we were. And it's very, I guess, the brotherhood of man motif, but it's always relevant, and it's always beautiful when it's articulated so well. Because up until that point, I'm kind of with the Islanders. I'm like, fuck you guys. You stole our fairies, you stole our egg, and then you tried to kidnap the fairies again. Why would we help you people? Because if Godzilla destroys all Japan, he's going to destroy their island and their culture, and eventually their deity as well. Everyone loses, and that, I think, Ishiro Honda, having witnessed the real horrors of World War II, he speaks on that topic with a little more authority than a lot of us can. So some of the other ideas in that film, nature is a huge element of that movie. As I mentioned before, Godzilla is especially, he is a force of nature. He's very much a force of nature in this film. and Mothra is as well. And you can see Honda wants these ideas on our mind throughout the course of the film. Um, the color palette that he chooses throughout the whole film, very muted, very natural. I don't think neutral is the right word. It's more of an organic color palette that he's constantly using, even when we're inside buildings, even when we're inside the city. There's not a lot of the harsh colors or elements. There's something very organic about the palette of this film. There's also a lot of shots, especially in even in the monster battles. The humans looking and watching the monsters. There's almost always like tree branches or vines right up against the camera, and the monsters, the actions in the background. Um, and I think the imagery is specific. I think he wants you thinking about this conflict of human versus nature, and what are we doing to nature. I think this is the first film that starts tiptoeing into environmental themes about happy enterprises and what they're doing to the land around them. So the last topic or philosophical point in this film that I've never seen a review tackle, but I find very intriguing. I'd love to hear some feedback either way on this. Is that whole end subplot with the kids stuck on the island, and Godzilla's going to the island, and it's a great setup. You've got that poor teacher buried under the rubble. He's bleeding and he's shouting, the kids will be killed. And before he even gets to finish the word killed, you hear Godzilla's roar, and it's one of those beautiful little editing tricks that immediately raises the stakes. Like, I remember the first time seeing this movie as a little kid, and I was scared. I did feel bad for the kids on the island. Uh, but this is a really smart Honda trick. This is a Honda trick that Garrett Edwards picked up on very specifically in the legendary Godzilla film, is finding ways to mirror the monster action and the human action. I do not think it is a coincidence that Mothra's main struggle is to protect her egg, to protect her infants, her offspring, and that the humans, I mean, their plot's a little half-dashed throughout this film, but that their end mission, their last goal in this film, is to get to an island and protect a group of children. And again, I'm going off my own ideas here. I haven't heard anyone try and comment on why it is the plot veers so quickly and almost weirdly to this uh, island full of stranded children. I think there is a message here about the next generation. I think if you really want to interpret it, go for like really literal symbolism, it's literally like the generation ahead of us is running from our past mistakes being personified by Godzilla. Godzilla is the result of human error. Godzilla is the result of human arrogance. And now here he is bearing down on the next generation, and all they can do is hide in a cave and hope they're out of its way. Um, I think that's an important element that Honda wanted in this film, is not just this discussion of treating our fellow humans, no matter the culture, no matter the race, treating them with respect and dignity, but it's sending that message. And that I think it's a message of pacifism. It's a message against war and violence at the end of the day, passing that on to the next generation. So both films just beautifully, beautifully actually have stuff that you can ignore it if you want. If you just want the special effects and the monster brawl, here it is. If you want something to think about, if you want some fun intellectualism or something just challenging for a moment to chew your brain over, both these films bring it to the forefront. And that's my favorite kind of Godzilla film. Is it's I appreciate some of the more heavy-handed political ones. Obviously, Gojira. I actually love Smog Monster, GMK, but I like these films that find the balance of it. That it's just kind of in the background, those ideas you want to think about and talk about. So let's see here. What else did I keep myself on track here? Special effects I've kind of hit up a few times. one of the things I like in both of these films are that the sequences with the military, they seem to actually matter. Um, I feel like especially the Showa series got really bad about it. It was just part of the tradition. It didn't seem to have any weight or meaning to the plot, and even the Heisei series just, we had the Super X's, the mechas a little bit, but it wasn't until the Millennium series that suddenly the military involvement felt like it meant anything. Both of these films, Mothra, there's after the first adult Mothra dies, there's a great sequence. The military, I mean, with the electric nets, there's that extended sequence for the American version with the missile launchers and the ships. It's well filmed. It looks devastating. It looks exciting. And then Biollante hits it even more out of the park. Super X2, not as good as Super X, but still fun, still interesting, still a good plot driver. And then the final military assault where they've got the maser cannons and the little bomb platforms to raise Godzilla's body temperature. It's just fun to see. If you're going to have the military, have them using clever tactics, have them doing something that matters. And both of these films, I feel like, give the military something to chew on, and that helps raise the stakes of these monsters. That, like, these monsters showing up really are dangerous and devastating. So, military. Oh, let's talk about music. Ifukube obviously nails it. Mothra versus Godzilla. All the Mothra themes sound to me even stronger than they did in the '61 film. Godzilla's original theme from '54 crops back up, blends in seamlessly. So much of the work he does here just like crystallizes into Toho canon. It becomes some of the most identifiable music of his career. It's beautiful stuff. You can't do better than Ifukube. That said, though, I had to look this up because I had no idea. So the music for Biollante, Koichi Sugiyama, Yuki Sato, God help me, I'm sure I'm butchering their names. I actually really love the music for Biollante. I read an article recently explaining that they didn't really have any sense of the movie when they were writing it. They basically composed stuff, and the editors at Toho were like, I think this will fit here. And a lot of the fans feel like that shows that it's pretty jarring. It's kind of a mess. I happen to disagree. I think most of the music cues, especially the opening theme, it gives the film an appropriate tension, kind of a sci-fi quality. The one I always remember is like the Ifukube song at the beginning where the terrorists are stealing the Godzilla cells and we have this shootout in broken down Tokyo. And suddenly like the 80s punk rock guitar just screams in there. I kind of love that 80s aesthetic. Like, you don't get it in any other Godzilla film, really. In general, I actually think the music for Biollante works surprisingly well. I'm even more surprised after, I think it was Planet Kaiju on Facebook, posted an article with a magazine editor who got to go back and interview people during the production of this film, and he found out a lot of, Godzilla versus Biollante was kind of a rushed, haphazard production for Toho. And all that said, it's surprisingly how well it came out. So, all right, folks, I think the Kaijuologist has rambled enough in my compare and contrast of Mothra versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus Biollante, two of my favorites. Yes, if I'm going to judge just on cinematic technique, I will hand it the original Gojira 1954 is a stronger film. For me personally, I can watch Mothra versus Godzilla any day of the week, anytime. Both of them are just exemplary examples of kaiju film for me. So anyway, thank you for hanging out, listening to me chat. I will be signing off from Denver, Colorado. We are the Mile High City, and we are getting higher all the time. Until next time, Kaiju fans.